Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. After a very successful visit to Bhutan, his first overseas visit as Prime Minister, Narendra Modi will be going to Japan later this week on a 2-day visit. The visit is being seen as highly significant as Japan is the first major country he will be visiting. While the bilateral ties between India and Japan had been on a low key for several years, in the last year or so it has seen a sharp improvement in ties. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to India earlier this year in January had laid the foundation for the betterment of the relations. Prime Minister Modi, who has a special place in his heart for Japan, having visited that country as Chief Minister of Gujarat a few times, is also keen to take the relationship to a new level. His stress on improving the economic relationship and boost Japanese investments in India and trade between the two countries will mean that the visit will focus on it. However, the strategic and nuclear ties are also on the cards. We will discuss what the visit means to the two countries and what can be the outcome we can expect from it. To discuss this, I have with me Rajeev Sikri, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, Baradas Ghoshal, Senior Fellow, Center for Policy Research, Alok Bansal, Executive Director, SAISA and Senior Fellow at CLOS, and Anand Sahai, Coordinating Editor, Asian Age. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Sikri, first visit was to Bhutan and now to Japan. This look east policy, is this part of the look east policy of government, or do you think this is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's own way of, showing what are his priorities?
I think we have to look at the forthcoming visit in the context of the acceleration and deepening of India-Japan relations over the last decade or so,
right,
starting with Prime Minister Koizumi's visit here. And then there was the established practice of having an annual exchange of visits at the Prime Minister level, a practice which is there only with Russia, I think. So I think it testifies to the objective importance that India and Japan are attaching to relations with the other country over the last decade or so. Certainly the fact that Mr. Modi has visited Japan, enjoys a good personal relationship with Mr. Abe, all this helps. I think it's also important that over the last couple of years, both Japan and India have been subjected to some pressure from China on the territorial disputes. We had the Depsang incident last year in Ladakh, and the Japanese have had to contend with Chinese assertiveness and aggressiveness over the Senkakus. So these factors, I think, form the backdrop. Why Mr. Modi decided to choose Japan is another question. I think it's a very good decision because Japan is a country which has a huge unrealized potential for development. With India, there is technology, there is investment, there is defense, and for a country which till recently was the second largest economy and now the third, I mean the relationship was very undeveloped. So when there is so much potential, I think it's important that Mr. Modi should focus on a country from which he will get in more than equal measure the reciprocal support.
Mr. Ghoshal, you think that, why do you think that India-Japan ties had been on such a low key for so long? And now, what is the China factor, has the China factor got India and Japan closer together? Is that one of the reasons?
I think I'll come to the China factor later.
Yes.
But more importantly, I think one has to look at it also from the point of view of Modi's priorities.
Right.
That is economic development, infrastructure, investment, job creation. Now, these are the three major priorities which Modi government had really highlighted. And within that context, I think Indo-Japan economic relations will achieve a certain amount of salience. Because one of the reasons why Indo-Japan relations had not reached full potential, particularly in terms of economic relationship, is the lack of infrastructure development within this country and also decision-making process, that things are delayed and Japanese get unusually upset about this kind of delay in decision-making.
But the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, the Japanese are expected to invest heavily there.
Yes, but apart from that, I think, as I said, that the two problems that really came in the way of Indo-Japanese close collaboration are the lack of infrastructure and decision making. And I think with Modi becoming the Prime Minister, as he has given a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, with the Japanese help and investment, particularly in India's northeast, there are possibilities of greater development in that area. And once the infrastructure develops, particularly in areas northeast, then obviously that will also lead to development and economic development particularly. And with it also comes job creation.
Right.
Now, I think apart from these economic reasons, as Rajeev has mentioned about the China's assertiveness, not only in terms of China's relationship with Japan, but also in terms of relationship with other Southeast Asian countries. And Japan is obviously quite nervous about this particular fact. So obviously India and Japan would like to come quite close because of strategic reasons. But I think one has to also steer that thing quite cautiously, because, I just came back from a seminar where there was a particular session, will Japan go back? That means there are concerns, not just among the Chinese, but also amongst the Southeast Asian countries who had experienced Japanese occupation at one point of time. They had expressed certain amount of uneasiness about Sino-Japanese confrontation and also the possibility of Japan going back to some kind of a militarist posture. Okay. So while trying to develop closer defense and other cooperation, I think we'll also have to look into some of the sensitivities of the countries in the region, in Southeast Asia particularly. Maybe we can also coordinate our relationship with ASEAN countries in order to develop much closer synergy between India and Japan.
Okay. Alok, the Japanese ambassador in India recently has given an interview saying that we should not look at the Indo-Japanese relationships through the prism of China. But isn't it inevitable in both Mr. Ghoshal and Mr. Sikri have spoken about it?
See, there are 2-3 issues which define Indo-Japanese relationship. And I will like to start from where Professor Baradas Ghoshal left. Unlike most other Asian countries, the common man in India thinks positively about Japan.
Right.
In fact, in most other states of the Asia, when Prime Minister Abe visited the Yakusuni shrine, there were protests. When Japan says that it wants to become a normal nation and start building up its military forces, there are protests. But in India, it is greeted.
Right.
India actually supports Japan's coming out of shadows and becoming a viable military power, because we see it as a challenger to China. Secondly, what happens is that I think Prime Minister Modi's focus on civilizational links and Indic culture,
right,
this so-called Dharma Dhamma concept which has been going on, Bhutan and now Japan, with which we have huge civilizational links, I think shows that. Thirdly, besides China, Japan is the only country which has huge investable funds. And as of now, I think this government's focus is on development. Now, you need foreign investment. The only countries which really have that sort of surplus funds is China and Japan.
Right.
And China, we have certain security issues because of this. And of course, we have the security issues. As you know, we had the P4 bid for Security Council seat, where India and Japan were together bidding for the permanent seat in the Security Council. So we have huge linkages, and as Japan comes out of its so-called military isolation and wants to become a normal nation, there is a huge scope for security cooperation. Yes, there are concerns in Southeast Asia, but if India and Japan collaborate, India has a reputation which I think will assuage the Southeast Asian mindset as far as the fears of Japan is concerned. They know that if it's a collaborative venture, then they need not worry about the hawkish postures from Japan. The history can be forgotten for some time at least.
Okay. Anand, the UPA government also had laid stress on the relations with Japan, and the fact that they invited him for the Republic Day ceremony here in January. So, do you see a continuation of the policy, or do you see it taking it, Modi trying to take it to the next level? How do you see it?
No, I think I'll rephrase your question. You said the UPA government had also,
yes,
in fact, they were the ones who initiated the whole thing, right? So, this is a continuation of that policy. not only was the Japanese PM, Mr. Abe, invited as the chief guest for the Republic Day, which has a significance of its own. You know, when we attach primacy to a particular country in a given year, then we seek to invite the leader of that country. Then don't forget the Emperor and the Empress of Japan.
Right.
They were in India last year.
Right.
So these things are going beyond symbolism. It is beyond Delhi Metro, Delhi-Bombay corridor.
Industrial corridor.
It is beyond a particular sector. In the Cold War years, there was a natural divide between Japan and India. We were perceived to be on two different sides. Then our pace of economic growth was very, very slow in those years. As Indian pace picks up, you find India getting interested in other countries getting equally interested in India on account of India's huge, enormous size, market. And manpower, trained manpower, and all the rest. So it's only logical that, as someone said just now, Japan rings a good bell in India. It has done so for the last 5 decades. It's not a matter of only the Maruti Suzuki.
No.
Okay, it goes back a long way.
It goes back to the time of love in Tokyo.
Okay, all right. So now, having said that, yes, but we should keep in mind that Japan is one major power. I would still call it a power. It may have slipped its, overall that GDP, PP definition of GDP, etc., to position number 3. But it has been a major power since the Second World War, after it rebuilt itself. With no other such power do we have a trouble-free relationship. With Japan, we've had no bilateral disputes, we've had no regional problems of any kind, we have no problem with the global issue, except in the Cold War years when we were on two different sides. And Japan, one more thing has to be added, what was seen to be India's nuclear ambition, Japan having been the victim of a nuclear blast, was not very supportive even of our civil nuclear venture, right? Since then, its stand has changed. In Japan itself, after the treaty arrangements with the US, Second World War, when they couldn't develop their own national forces and so on, they had to be called a defense force, they couldn't export arms and so on. So much has changed in that country as well, right? Now, I do not go along with the thinking, which many people share, I don't, that India and Japan are trying to be good friends because there is China in between, which has a problem with both. I don't think Japanese-Chinese ties are going to be breaking anytime soon either. They have a trade between them of hundreds of billions of US dollars. Don't forget that. They may have this Senkaku and Daikyo in between, right? And it is true, there is Mr. Abe is seen as a leader with a nationalist inclination, right? As far as I am concerned, all of China's leaders since Mao Zedong have had nationalist inclinations, and our present Prime Minister seems to be having nationalist inclinations, if you go by the broad definition under which political parties work in this country. So I think all that cancels itself out. I think all these 3 countries have important, Japan, China and India, have important reasons to be friendly with each other, while some of them may have certain problems, like China and Japan do. But the strategic aspect, in terms of globally, we can cooperate a lot with certainly Japan and many other countries. But in terms of regional architecture, regional security architecture, let's say, of the Asia-Pacific region, it is yet to fully mature and evolve. That process is certainly going on, where one will bring in Australia as well.
And this visit may give some impetus to that process.
Well, it will certainly be in the backs of everybody's mind, and I'm sure that this would be something that that is, whether there is if there is a joint statement, if there are certain agreements, if this will be formally a part of it or not, I can't say.
Okay.
But it will certainly be in the background that India and Japan can cooperate not only in economy and trade. Trade is going to be important, but certainly civil nuclear energy, I hope, and also. Some years ago, there was some discussion between India and Japan on the sale of U-2 amphibious boats.
Absolutely.
Right. So I hope that try to give it a wider shape than it has been so far.
Sikri, would you agree with that, that this wider shape can happen? There has been, the Japanese ambassador recently has given an interview saying that there are talks going on about signing a Japan-India nuclear deal on the lines of what India has signed with US.
This has been going on for many years now.
But now it seems to have taken a particular shape, and the Japanese ambassador was saying, hoping that it may come through actually.
Well, we welcome that if that were to happen.
What would that mean?
I think it would mean that Japan has definitely taken some extra steps to ensure that the relationship with India accelerates forward. I think that because the concessions have to be made on their side.
Right.
I don't think that we can have a deal which is different from the India-US deal.
Right.
Japan had a certain problem, but if they can get around that, and that's their internal matter, I think it would be a very good sign. I think it would also open the doors for a lot of transfer of technology from Japan to India. I would emphasize technology more than investment. We can get the money from other countries also, there's the Gulf countries and so forth, but Japan has outstanding technology, cutting edge technology, and we need that. And if there is a willingness to share that with India, that would benefit us greatly, whether in the civilian or in the defense. On the defense side, they have some inhibitions. Mr. Abe is trying to see if he can change the constitution or at least permit sale or of advanced equipment. But on the civilian side, if we can get a lot more technology, I think it would be very, very beneficial to India. So I see the visit as a very positive one that will take the relationship
to the next level.
To a new level.
To a new level.
To a new level. It's very steadily going up, as Anand said. It started about 10 years ago, and the UPA government started with. But what is now required is that there should be a much broader awareness among the investors, among the businessmen in both Japan and India about the potential and the possibilities, so that we can engage with each other and benefit from this engagement much more actively than we have so far.
Mr. Ghoshal, do you see this civilian nuclear deal happening, and do you think that how important would it be if it happens?
I'm hopeful about it, because there are some trends which indicate that Japan might be yielding on some of these issues. I think these are the
What are the issues? What are the major issues which have been in the way, which have come in the way?
Basically, Japan has been insisting on India signing the non-proliferation treaty.
Right.
I think that will be overcome, to my mind, because now with greater political understanding and economic opportunities that Modi might invite,
that
India offers, I think there might be possibilities that Japan might yield on those issues and might come to some kind of an understanding with India that might facilitate this. I think that was one major hurdle that India has to cross. And the second also, I think Rajeev has emphasized this fact very clearly, the technology.
Right.
If you look at Japan's relationship with Southeast Asian countries in the 70s and 80s, you will see that much of the economic development and the takeoff that Southeast Asian countries and other Asian countries have achieved during that period was because of Japanese technology as well as Japanese investment.
Right.
And Japan played a tremendous role in terms of the lifting of that region from poverty to development.
Right.
So I think India now, with its new kind of attitude towards investment and other kinds of economic openings, I have a feeling that Indo-Japan economic cooperation will achieve much greater salience than, because while strategic and political understanding had been progressing quite a bit in terms of defense cooperation, even under Manmohan Singh government. But now I think the focus would be, because that was a major disappointment with Japan, whereas other countries had invested in this country, Japan had been one of the lowest investors compared to what it has done to other countries. So I think economic relations will achieve, and technological, as Rajeev has mentioned, I think the technological cooperation, which will really give a boost to India's attempt for economic development, that would be one of the major salience in terms of, and Modi's visit might, accelerate that process.
Alok, we are also talking of strategic partnership and that this visit may actually take it to a new level, to a different level altogether. What does it mean?
See, I personally feel there are common security interests, there are common strategic interests, and when we look at India and Japan, there are I think 2-3 issues on which there is a huge congruence of interests. One is of course freedom of the seas. For an island nation like Japan, everything comes through the seas. Now Chinese claims in South China Sea go against any established laws as far as the maritime law are concerned. Now that actually pitches us. Secondly, piracy, maritime piracy. India has in the past been of great help to Japanese as far as issues of maritime piracy are concerned. In fact, we recovered their vessels, etc. So bulk of their goods pass through Indian Ocean region where we can actually provide them security. But of late, what we need to understand is that what has recently happened, where Mosul has fallen to a radical Islamist movement, bulk of both India and Japan's oil comes from this region actually. Right. And there is a congruence of interest. If this sort of radical Islamist movement starts sweeping through this area, there is going to be a huge disruption of oil supplies to both these countries.
You're talking of Iraq?
I'm talking of Iraq. Where and so both the countries have interest in ensuring that the oil flow from this part continues. So there is a great interest. I think there can be certain amount of congruence whereby India could provide certain security to Japanese shipping transiting through Indian Ocean region and vice versa. Of course, as has been said, that not only the civilian sector but even Indian defense forces are really looking for technology, and Japanese technology and Japanese investment could really change the face of Indian economy and India in coming decades. And I think that is the reason why I think Prime Minister has selected Japan for this special treatment of being the second country he is visiting outside the Indian subcontinent.
Alok, the defense, in defense matters, Japan has never sold any defense equipments to India, but as Anand was earlier pointing out, this amphibious aircraft and things like that, you think this could be a beginning in defense cooperation at that level?
See, because Japanese constitution bars it, so you can only give things which you have to showcase as civilian, dual use technologies where you have to show a civilian objective for this. Any craft which can be used for civilian purposes can easily be given. And the second fact is, yes, despite not having given something, Indian Navy and Japanese self-defense forces, we have been cooperating. There have been joint exercises which have been carried out. So India and Japan have been coming closer, and in fact, in one of the few cases, we have even in the only multilateral exercise which Indian Navy ever indulged in was in Bay of Bengal, where India, Japan, Australia and US participated. Right. Of course, after that the reaction has thereafter actually we have not really followed it up, but we have a fairly good cooperation with Japan as far as training and other factors are concerned. And I think as President Abe wants to get over these constitutional constraints, and once he gets over these constitutional constraints, we will see greater defense cooperation.
Mr. Sikri, Anand was talking about the ideological affinity between the two prime ministers. How far is that going to be of any help, or how far is it going to help in improving the relationship, or is it something which doesn't matter in international relations?
I think that a good personal relationship certainly helps. I mean, if two leaders cannot stand each other, if there are bad vibes, then it's a problem. But I would not overemphasize the personal relationships. I think sometimes Indian leaders
because media tends to
there's a personal rapport and so on and so forth. I don't think we should. There are objective factors which dictate how two countries will interact with each other, and I think the objective factors which are bringing Japan and India closer together are far more important than the personal ones. Yes, I think that the fact that Prime Minister Modi was very well received in Japan, as indeed in China, and perhaps not so well received or even welcomed in the West, will be a factor. I don't think he could have chosen a Western country as his first destination. Right. So that was a factor, presumably.
Right.
Japan is a good country to visit in that sense.
It's been very friendly to him.
Of course, there's been because there are no problems between India and Japan, and there's so much unrealized potential. You know, when the king, the emperor of Japan and the empress come to India, when Mr. Abe is made the chief guest of Republic Day, when our Prime Minister undertakes his first visit outside the region to Japan, all these are signals to the business and communities on both sides and to the people of both countries that we attach importance to each other. This is the important thing.
Mr. Ghoshal, these signals, how is it being received in China?
I think it's not received very positively, the close cooperation between India and Japan. And that's why you find the Chinese are also making overtures towards India.
Right.
Suddenly, the Chinese foreign minister comes over to India to see Modi, and not just accidents. I think there are indications of a certain trends which had been taking shape. And I think as regards the personal equation between the two leaders, I think why people talk about Modi and Abe, essentially because both have a similar kind of ideological orientation in terms of creating a very strong nation, because both were quite well-known economic sort of kind of powers. Yet you see a sudden decline, particularly in the case of Japan. From second to third, I think it is a big shock for Japan. And I think here is a man who wants to revive not only the economy, but also the prestige of Japan in the Committee of Nations. So is the case of Modi. That, suddenly you see we had a prime minister who was very docile, didn't have that kind of a, national kind of a stress on him. And suddenly you see Modi, looks a different person like Abe. So maybe there is certain equation that will also help to create the kind of synergy that helps in developing closer relationship between two countries.
Anand, very quickly, you think these personal relationships matter?
Of course they matter, but as I think Ambassador Sikri rightly said, we shouldn't
overemphasize it. But we people in the media do overemphasize it.
Well, we sometimes overemphasize many things we don't need to.
Very quickly, Alok. So you think that this visit is going to take these ties to a next level, apart from not just trade, investment, economic ties, but even at the strategic and this civil nuclear thing?
He said there's enough, I want to say this, there's enough going for the two. Even if there were not extra special relations between two individuals, there's enough going for the two, objectively speaking, and in prospect.
Correct.
For the two to widen the relationship.
Alok, that's one thing. And second, the Chinese factor.
See, there is no doubt, I think both these leaders are desirous of making their nations strong, and there is commonality of interest which brings them together. And China is, I think, cognizant of this fact, and I think Chinese overtures also indicate, and if I am right, in next 5 years we will see closer relations with both Japan as well as with China, and I think we will see a new India emerging.
I think that's on a very positive note we'll end. It's a win-win situation for India, in fact, that if we are seen to be getting closer to Japan, China wants to be closer to us. So it will be a win-win situation for India as far as having these two major nations as good friends. We'll wait and watch how this relationships develops over the coming years. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Rajeev Sikri, Baradas, Ghoshal, Anand, Sahai and Alok Bansal. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture same time tomorrow.